Hi, Steve. Tim Nelson Hoy is the chair of our Adult Education Committee. Hi, Tom. Welcome. So we are, this is our grand finale presentation in this. Roeshana saying, oh no. But I'll just say this is our final presentation in this series that we've called Listening to Others Humbly. And we've been doing this as we prepare for, the next phases of our work, including our living memorial. I am honored to introduce Roeshana Moore Evans, who has come to us. Well, I guess I should say that some time ago, Melissa and I heard Roeshana present at a just before the Embrace opened up their new statue. She was one of the main featured people who talked about at Mass Design about her work and what this all meant to her. And we followed up, and we're just glad to have made that connection at that time. I'll tell you that Roeshana is a person of great faith. She's someone who attends Morning Star Baptist Church. She regularly, if Dean or I forget to pray at the beginning of a meeting, she kind of, nudges us a little bit very nicely, which is good. So we're grateful for that. And I also wanted to say that she was the inaugural director at Harvard for all of their work when they issued that monumental report about their complicity with slavery. And her task was, among other things, she'll tell us more, but they set aside $100 million to try to do some repair work. And Roeshana was the person who, in that very always cordial environment where there's never any disagreements and everyone always works very, very well together to try to come up with plans for that. So she comes with a wealth of experience, born in Boston, and we're just thrilled to have you here, Roeshana. So I will let you take off. I did. Are you going to mention your mama speech?
Oh, yeah, a little bit. Not really. I'm probably not.
I told everybody that you were going to give it to us. So I misled everybody, but I want you.
No, I mean I had to modify it because it's a different audience. And so I want it to be, authentic and genuine to the people that I'm speaking with about this work. So some of the comments are from there. I talk a little bit about art and history, but it's not the exact same comments.
So I apologize.
Joy was hoping to read along because I sent her
Exactly.
my remarks. So she was like, I'm just gonna read along as she goes through this MoMA presentation. But
what I just wanted you to know, and what all this reference back and forth is about, is that a few weeks ago, Roeshana was invited to speak at the Museum of Modern Art in New York City, where they were having a major conference about memorials and how we create memorials and how important they are, and the visual and the arts. And so we're honored that you are working with us now also, Roeshana, because your work is recognized nationally. Thank you.
oh wow. Joy always says more about me than I would ever say about myself. She's like the best hype woman ever, and I appreciate her for that. I am going to try to share slides and also share my remarks. Give me one moment. Can I have sharing capabilities?
While Roeshana is doing that, I just want to say not only was she invited to speak at MoMA, but Carrie Mae Weems, who's a legendary, she's a living legend artist and activist, is the person who invited Roeshana. So it was a very big deal. And the symposium was called Monumental Concerns, and it was a whole day about monuments.
What was
And
that name, Melissa?
Carrie Mae Weems.
Could you
I
put
can
that
put
in
it in
the
the
chat,
chat.
please? Thanks.
Sure.
Are you able to share now, Roeshana?
Let's
Or no?
see.
Oh, good.
You all
Okay,
should be able to see my screen.
great.
Although, I think the only thing, give me 1 second. You all should be able to see my slides now, but let me put a slide show. Are you able to see this okay?
Yes.
And are you able to see captions too?
Yes.
I did not mean to do, but.
Do you
here we
want
are.
that? Because we can take that away if you don't want that.
It's fine.
Well, and we can do it individually, I think.
Okay, that's cool. Let me, I'm probably going to stop sharing. Give me a moment or, oh, going too far. All right. I'm actually likely going to share. I'm sorry for you all. Let me just see what I can do here because I also have notes that I wanted to take a look at. All right. Give me one moment. I'm sorry. We should have done a run through. Let me just on my other screen. Give me one second. Yep.
Roeshana, you may want to hit that screen looking button just
No,
on the
I
bottom.
know which one to hit. I just want to see my my notes. So that's the only thing that I can't see that, but we're gonna get there. See. All right. And which screen are you all? Are you all seeing the screen that has the caption still?
Yes. It has the year slide and then the next slide, and then down below it has all of them in a row. And
Well, I'm just
then-
going to show this screen if you all don't mind.
Great.
And that way I can actually take a look at my notes as well. All right. All right. Well, good evening, everyone. As Joy mentioned, my name is Roeshana Moore Evans, and I'm honored to walk alongside King's Chapel and its journey toward reconciliation. I will serve as a supporter and facilitator of the church's memorial work, important work made possible through the generous support of the Lilly Endowment. So over the past several weeks, I've had a chance to watch many of the Monday night Lenten services, and I must say they've been incredibly inspiring and informative. Tonight, I come with a humble heart, hoping to encourage you, to reflect with you, and to share a bit about my own story and lean into the sacred work alongside you. It is especially a profound blessing to be with you all during Holy Week, a time when the story of our faith draws us into both the sorrow and heart of the hope of the gospel. As someone who grew up in the church, I know how deeply meaningful this week is, and I'm so grateful to be in community with you all tonight. So just yesterday, I celebrated Palm Sunday at my own church, Morning Star Baptist Church in Mattapan. It was, as always, a powerful experience full of joyful praise, singing and dancing, waving palm branches to welcome the King, and preparing ourselves for the pain of Good Friday and the miracle of Easter morning. The message was titled An Inconvenient Truth, and this spoke directly to my spirit, especially about this work. And what Bishop Borders talked about was the truth about Jesus. We know that his arrival in this world, his teachings, his ministry, his challenge to the status quo was profoundly inconvenient. Inconvenient for those in power, inconvenient for religious institutions and leaders who had grown comfortable, inconvenient for empires built on hierarchy, domination, and fear. Jesus didn't come to uphold the existing order. He came to turn it upside down, to lift up the lowly, to call out injustice, to remind us that love and truth are not always safe, but they are always liberating. And that brings me to the work that we're doing here at King's Chapel. The truth about slavery, its reality, its legacy, and its ties to institutions we hold dear is one of those inconvenient truths. For too long, the truth has been hidden, minimized, or explained away. It has been treated as something to quietly acknowledge and quickly move past. But as Bishop Borders remarked yesterday in his sermon, you can deny it, you can distort it, you can bury it deep in the ground, but eventually truth takes root. And when God is ready, truth rises up and refuses to be ignored. Christianity at its core calls us to face hard truths. The cross is not comfortable. Holy Week is not convenient. Yet we return to it each year because in that tension, in that deep wrestling with death and justice, we find the seeds of resurrection. It's no coincidence that God is calling forth truth right now in this moment. The truth about slavery and its enduring impact on our communities. The truth about how even our sacred spaces, churches, colleges, cities, have been complicit in systems of oppression. It is uncomfortable, it is painful, but it is also holy work. And I believe that this work of truth-telling, of repair, of remembering is not only necessary, it is sacred. It is the work of resurrection. So I'm not here to preach today, which just almost sounds like a service. I know that I'm towing the line, but I'm here to talk about the calling that God has placed on my life, a calling to bear witness to truth, to honor the stories of our ancestors, and to build a more just and loving future. And now, by God's grace, that journey has brought me here with you all at King's Chapel. So I come to this sacred work. I wanted to give a little bit of background about myself before I jumped into the work that I'm doing at King's Chapel. So I come to the sacred work, not just as a professional, but as someone shaped by a deep personal connection to art, history, faith, and justice. I grew up here in Boston, a city layered with stories, but often divided in whose stories get told. I spent most of my childhood in Jamaica Plain, with strong ties to Roxbury and Dorchester, communities steeped in Black culture, creativity, tradition, and resistance. These neighborhoods didn't just raise me, they awakened me. My father, who you see, this handsome fellow in the middle there, he raised me as a single father, and he used art and literature to challenge the dominant narratives that sought to diminish Black identity. He filled our home with the bold colors of Jacob Lawrence. This is a piece of his right now that we had in our house. The soul-stirring voice of Billie Holiday, the brilliance of John Coltrane, and the piercing truths of Richard Wright, Langston Hughes, and Ralph Ellison. Art and literature weren't background noise in our home. They were front and center. They taught, they were forms of resistance, and they were a call to remember who we are and where we come from. I learned that our stories, the narratives we tell ourselves, are not just meant to educate us, but they are a form of survival. And my bonus mom, Maury Levin, who I don't have a picture of, she was my father's former partner, is both an artist and a capital defense attorney who represents people on death row. So these are a couple of pieces of her work that she did. She actually painted this picture of my grandmother, my father's mother, here. And she made a silhouette of this cutout that was of me and my grandfather, my little brother, in the Boston Globe many years ago. And she really taught me that art and advocacy are not separate, they are intertwined. Maury showed me that art can be both deeply personal and universally resonant, that it can hold grief and grace at the same time. And then there's my grandmother, this beautiful picture that you see here. She's my father's mother, as I mentioned. She was a minister, a truth teller, a woman of fierce love and deep conviction. She welcomed civil rights activists into her home as they passed through Boston. She fought for fair housing, she fed her neighbors, she prayed with them and stood with them. Though she passed when I was very young, her spirit is alive in me. Her legacy shaped my father and through him shaped me. From her, I learned that Christian faith and justice never were meant to be separate. To follow Christ is to feed the hungry, fight the oppressed, and speak the truth in face of silence. That is the faith I inherited. That is the justice I believe in. For me, justice is not just a legal concept, it's a spiritual one. It's about being seen, being heard, being valued. It's about telling the truth, even when it's hard, and loving deeply, even when it's inconvenient. That understanding deepened when I became a mother, because nothing sharpens your clarity around justice quite like wanting your children to live in a world a world that truly honors their full humanity. And now I get to one of my favorite pictures in this presentation. This is my daughter, Ashley. This beautiful face you see here was captured in a photo I took of her years ago while we were waiting in line at the Museum of Modern Art in New York. From the time she was little, Ashley and I shared a love of art, music, and literature. Our weekends often found us wandering the galleries of the Museum of Fine Arts in Boston, tucked into the corners of Boston Public Library, or strolling the halls of MoMA when we traveled to New York. These spaces weren't just places to pass the time, they were places of wonder, possibility, and imagination. They fed our creativity. They reminded us that we come from brilliance, that we too belong in the city of Boston. But one day when Ashley was in 3rd grade, the sense of possibility was shattered by a single sentence. Her class was learning about the Wampanoag natives and what life was like before colonization. Ashley, in her natural curiosity and wonder, said aloud that she thought it would have been amazing to live back then. And without missing a beat, a classmate turned to her and said, "If you had lived back then, you would have been a slave, and I would have been the daughter of a slave owner." And that moment cut deep for her, for me. It was more than just childhood cruelty. It was a reflection, a revelation of how entrenched and unchallenged the narratives of power, dominance, and white supremacy still are, even in our children, even in a 3rd grade classroom. And it was a turning point for me. That one sentence is something that lit a fire in me. It became a catalyst for the work I do now. It forced me to confront in a deeply personal way just how urgently we need to rewrite the narratives that shape our children's understanding of history and of themselves. Because make no mistake, what we teach or fail to teach matters. When we center only certain stories, we erase others. When we gloss over hard truths, we deny people their full humanity. And when children like mine are made to feel invisible or inferior in spaces meant to educate and uplift, that's not just an oversight, that's a systemic failure. From that moment forward, I committed to challenging dominant narratives, to creating space for truth-telling, to ensuring that the fullness of Black history, not just the trauma, but the triumph, the culture, the contributions, are seen, heard, and honored. That commitment has led me to launch initiatives in schools and workplaces and communities to open up honest, often uncomfortable conversations about race, power, and history. Because if we're ever going to move toward true healing, toward equity, toward transformation, we have to start with the truth. So that moment with Ashley didn't just stay with me as a parent, it propelled me as a professional, as a woman of faith, and as someone determined to disrupt the systems and stories that sustain injustice. That same urgency to confront history and reclaim truth led me to serve as the inaugural executive director of the Legacy of Slavery Initiative. In that role, I was entrusted with leading efforts to move the university beyond mere acknowledgement and into the realm of accountability. Backed by a $100 million endowment, our charge was to seed meaningful, long-term repair. Harvard's Presidential Committee on the Legacy of Slavery laid out 7 recommendations for institutional reckoning. Among the most powerful was recommendation 2, which you can see on the screen, which called for a permanent and imposing physical memorial, convening space or both, to recognize and honor the enslaved people whose labor facilitated the founding, growth, and evolution of Harvard. This idea of memorialization, of physically and spiritually making space to remember, to reckon, and to honor, resonated and still resonates deeply with me. Not only as a professional working in the field of reparative justice, but as a granddaughter of a minister, as a mother, and as someone who believes in the sacred power of naming and remembering. But this work was not without its challenges, as you all can imagine. Like many institutions embarking on the journey of repair for the first time, Harvard's early efforts were met with critique. Many felt the process lacked sufficient community input and failed to embody the principle that repair must start not with institutions, but with the people most impacted by the harm. Community engagement cannot be an afterthought. It must be the foundation, and justice must be co-created. From my understanding now, Harvard has since begun to course correct, creating space for deeper community participation and working to embody a more collaborative, accountable approach. While I am no longer there, obviously, my commitment to truth-telling and historical reckoning remains steadfast. Because the work doesn't end with a report, it doesn't end with a memorial, no matter how imposing it may be. It must live on in the commitment we make, in the power we share, and the future we imagine together. So my journey in this work didn't end at Harvard. Obviously, I'm here with you all at King's Chapel. In many ways, it brought me full circle back to the city where I was raised. to the sacred spaces where our public and private histories converge. That same commitment to reconciliation and repair, grounded in authentic community engagement, has led me to my current work with King's Chapel. As you all know, one of Boston's oldest churches and a prominent stop on the Freedom Trail, visited by millions of people each year. As the congregation began to reckon with its own legacy of slavery, its leadership recognized not only a moral obligation, but a public one, to confront the church's role in systems of racial harm and to honor the more than 219 enslaved people whose labor and lives are entwined with the church's foundation. In that spirit, as you all know, King's Chapel moved swiftly toward commissioning a physical memorial. Yet, as with many early efforts at institutional repair, the speed of this action raised concerns. Some community members rightly questioned whether there had been sufficient engagement with descendants of the enslaved or with Boston's broader Black community, those most impacted by the legacies of the church was seeking to address. That's where I step in to help lead and shape the community engagement process in a way that centers dignity, accountability, and healing. And this work includes centering descendants in the process, not as stakeholders, but as co-creators, opening space for public accountability, inviting hard conversations with courage and humility, supporting the church's emerging reconciliation efforts through programming, partnerships, and a commitment to sustained change. Because memorialization is not just about stone and plaque. It's not about symbols for symbol's sake. True memorialization is a living practice. It is how we remember with integrity. It is how we hold institutions accountable, not only to the past, but to the future. So working alongside King's Chapel's Memorial Committee, I've seen the beginnings of a shared understanding emerge. That this cannot be a one-time installation of symbolic gesture. Instead, it must be a sustained, evolving commitment, a way of being in relationship with truth, with justice, and with community. So while Harvard and King's Chapel are vastly different institutions, one an elite academic powerhouse, the other a historic house of worship, working with both has revealed foundational truths about what meaningful repair actually requires. Across both contexts, I've seen that people must come before process. Bureaucracy should never take precedence over human dignity or lived experience. No institutional timeline is more important than the time it takes to build trust. Community must be at the core. Those who have been harmed, descendants, local communities, and historically marginalized voices must be centered, not just consulted. Their leadership is not optional, it's essential to this work. And repair must go beyond the physical. A report, a plaque, a memorial, none of these are enough on their own. True repair requires ongoing investment, courageous dialogue, public accountability, and a commitment to transformation that lives on beyond any single narrative. So both institutions, deeply embedded in Boston's layered history and visited by millions, now sit at a critical juncture. They have the opportunity not only to correct the record, but to reshape public memory itself, to move beyond performative gestures and become models of institutional courage and accountability. And if they do this work well, not perfectly, but faithfully, they can help lead us all toward a deeper, more honest relationship with our shared history. And so as I reflect on this work of remembrance, repair, and truth-telling, it's been both empowering and deeply challenging. Empowering because I've had the opportunity to lead at a moment when institutions like King's Chapel and Harvard are choosing to confront their histories of enslavement and oppression. They are acknowledging harm and making commitments to repair. And to be clear, this is historic. For too long, Black women, descendants of the very communities these institutions marginalized, were excluded from these conversations altogether. The fact that we now have a voice and sit at the table is meaningful, but it must also be a lever for real change. And at the same time, this work is really challenging, as you all can imagine. White supremacy is not just a belief system, it's a structure. It lives in policies and procedures and hierarchies. It lives in how decisions are made, whose voices are elevated, and how power is distributed. Even in moments of institutional reckoning, self-preservation often resists transformation, and it shows up in subtle but powerful ways. Who gets to define community? whose ideas are seen as legitimate? How quickly does the work stall when discomfort arises? These barriers aren't always intentional, but they are very real. And if we're not actively working to dismantle them, then we're reinforcing them. And so I see this work ahead as twofold. First, we must shift hearts and minds internally, because real change isn't about updating policies or erecting a statue. It requires cultural transformation. We must also shift power structures, ensuring that power, knowledge, and resources are shared with the very communities that have been historically dehumanized and excluded. We must be truth tellers, not acknowledging the harm, but making sure the public is fully informed about the history, the commitments being made, and their rightful place in shaping the path forward. And I personally don't believe in skimming the surface, so we have to think about how we really talk about this work and the ongoing legacy of slavery, because the legacy still shows up today. It shows up in redlining and mass incarceration and education and economic disparities and healthcare inequities. And that really brings us, I think, all to a fundamental question. What does repair look like? And my role is to ensure that these institutions don't just confront their history, but actively work to cede power and resources to the communities they once excluded, because they are the ones who should be leading the way forward. And so in closing, just a few weeks ago, I traveled with the members of King's Chapel to Montgomery, Alabama, as Joy mentioned. It was my third time visiting the Legacy Museum and the National Memorial for Peace and Justice. Yet the weight of that experience, every time I visit, it never dulls. In fact, it actually deepens. Each time I return, I'm reminded that this work is not just intellectual, it's visceral, it's spiritual. It calls on our entire being. Walking through the memorial of the National Memorial for Peace and Justice, surrounded by the names of thousands who were lynched, brutalized, and silenced, I could feel the magnitude of what it means to tell the truth in our country that has spent centuries trying to bury it. It is an inconvenient truth, yes, but it is also a necessary one, because you cannot heal what you will not name, and you cannot repair what you refuse to acknowledge. And so the journey of King's Chapel, the willingness of its leaders to face their own legacy and now to bring community into the fold, is a reminder of what's possible when institutions embrace humility, accountability, and the spirit of collaboration. And that's what gives me hope. I know some of this has sounded very solemn, but it gives me hope that despite the weight of this work, despite the resistance that sometimes shows up cloaked in bureaucracy or fear, despite the pain of having to revisit wounds that never fully healed, there is a path forward, and it is being shaped by truth tellers, bridge builders, descendants, and community members who refuse to let the history be forgotten. I do this work not because it's easy, because it surely isn't, but because it is necessary. Because my children deserve to live in a world where their imagination is not interrupted by violence masked as innocence, but because our communities deserve repair, not just in words, but also in action. And that's the end of my talk.
Thank you very much, Roeshana. So this has been the theme really of this Lenten series. How do we listen to others humbly? Roeshana has just shared with us the necessity of putting those impacted by the harm of slavery at the very center. So that's our hope. And Roeshana is going to help us with that. You might, Roeshana, could you just, we're open for anybody's questions. I was also thinking, Roeshana, you might want to talk about some of the steps that you've imagined, including having a chance to talk with members of the church. Do you want to mention that?
Sure. Happy to take questions first and then talk about that. So, I just want to make sure that we have enough time for folks to ask any questions that they may have. And I may not have the answer right now because this is ongoing work, but I'm happy to answer the question if I have an answer.
I can start, Roeshana. You usually have to prime these things. One of the things that struck me, and I wonder if you could comment a bit on that, is because it's a particular passion of our church, environmental justice, and wondered if you could talk a little bit about how we might step more firmly there.
So environmental justice is not my thing. Unfortunately, Kent hopped off, so he can't give any insight into that. But I think that I'm not sure if there are conversations that are happening right now in Roxbury and Dorchester and Mattapan and cities where there's a high population of Black and Brown people. But I think starting some of those conversations there could be helpful. We know that highways were put in these places, and we know the environmental effects that highways and, heavy volume of cars and transmission going through the air, how difficult that can be and how that can impact health. So that may be a good start if it's not already happening, but I don't want to assume. I wish that Kent was here because he can share a little bit more about what he's thinking as far as connecting with the Black and Brown communities in Dorchester, Mattapan, and Roxbury.
And Cynthia, I don't know if you want to share, but we received notice, a number of us notification from him about the speaker we're going to have after Easter on Tuesday. And does anyone else have more information want to share about that?
He is with an organization called Speaking for the Trees, with the Trees, for the Trees. And I just know what we've sent out. I'm really looking forward to the work they do, which is disseminating little plants and trees, and then following up and having just a consciousness of the communities where there's a lack of this kind of arbors and greenery, and working towards more of that. So we'll all learn more on Tuesday at 5 o'clock. I'm really looking forward. David Mashulam is our instructor for that.
It says it's work that's being done in Roxbury and other communities within Boston. So good.
I think
Amy Meyer.
Roshana, thank you for being here. Given all the work that you've done, I'm just wondering, we've all seen, especially since George Floyd, many, many churches and other organizations, including Harvard and many, many others, trying to do things that were constructive ways of combating, I can't think of the right word, but have you been able to determine some patterns or some, rather than us reinventing the wheel, have you seen things that work that you could sort of give us some examples, things that you think are really going great that might be models for us?
Yes, I mean, there's work that's happening at the Virginia Theological Seminary where they are connecting with their descendant community. They have a historical ties to enslavement, and they are doing really deep work with that community that's around them. They have a reparations fund where they are giving out money to community members, and that's just one model, but the community members feel seen, they feel heard. They are in community with with the seminary quite often. And I'm not sure how successful it is because all of this work is new. And so we probably don't have a lot of data on it until good like 5-10 years, maybe even more down the line. But the community engagement piece seems to be at the heart of any good work. If you can reach out to the communities that were harmed and build authentic relationships, that at least starts the conversation and starts the reconciliation efforts. So all that to say, there's not enough data, right? Like, I don't think we know enough at this time. But there are the areas of community engagement that seem to be key for many institutions doing this work.
Thank you, Amy. Steve Washburn, were you raising your hand earlier?
He's on mute. You're on mute, Steve. Ben.
Cheryl, can you ask him as host to unmute?
I think he's trying to unmute now.
Okay.
Are you able to unmute him as a host, Cheryl?
No.
No. Okay. Sorry about that.
The reason they don't let a host unmute someone is what if you didn't want to be heard? You know, whatever was going on in the background. So that's a privacy.
Okay, how's this?
Oh,
Oh,
There we
good.
go.
All right.
excellent.
I'm the volunteer historian for Church of the Pilgrimage UCC in Plymouth. And recently we celebrated at the Parting Ways Village, which was land donated by the town of Plymouth to 4 formerly enslaved people with their families who had served during the American Revolution in the Massachusetts Regiment. That was in the 1790s. And descendants of these people gathered, and they said, we've got about 60 acres of land at the cemetery. Let's set up, there are 4 families, let's set up a walking trail named for each one of the families, the founders, like Cato, Plato Turner was one. Now, when we give tours at King's Chapel, perhaps we could have, if we can identify the stories of people who were enslaved and at King's Chapel, perhaps we could have a walking tour. Where did they sit? Were they baptized? Of course they were. Were they married there? Yes. What about the protests in the 1760s and 70s that changed the public opinion in Boston about slavery? If you read the book Belonging, an intimate history of slavery and family in Eastern Massachusetts, you see that it was the advocacy of enslaved people who were attending churches and then saying, you bless our baptisms, you bless our marriages, and then you break up our families. What kind of hypocrisy is this?
Yeah.
So, tell those stories, with interpreters named for some of the actual people who were, in the slave pews at King's Chapel. Just one suggestion.
I'll tell you, Steve, we invite you and invite everyone to come take a tour, because we do cover that material in our tours. And we're very excited this spring to unveil a new tour, which is centered around the idea of freedom. Freedom for who? Freedom for some, freedom for all. And we'll end at our new statue, and we'll tell the complicated and complex story of King's Chapel. It's an exciting time. So please come take a tour and see what we're doing. It's really an exciting time.
And let me also say, why not have a teach-in? People from congregations in Roxbury, Dorchester, Jamaica Plain, and people at King's Chapel, you get together, and compare notes and listen and learn from each other.
Wonderful, wonderful idea.
Great. How about James and then Jennifer?
Thank you. In reference to your 2 points about community relationship building being forefront, and also the importance of the impacted communities being at the forefront of organizing and implementing any such programs, certainly understand and appreciate the principle, but at a practical level, not rhetorical, but question as a question of who represents the Black community in terms of how do we, obviously we don't want to hand pick people from the Black community, but at the same time, we need to, how do we find our partners as far as that goes?
Yeah, it's hard, right? Because you're most comfortable with the groups that you know, right? So if you get to know folks and you're like, okay, these are my people. I think the first thing that I've been thinking about for King's Chapel is the relationship with the Black church in Boston. I know those relationships don't currently exist as fully as they could. And so one thing that I'm doing is introducing Joy and others to some Black ministers in Boston. I think Joy already has a relationship with some of them, so it's not quite new. But just to start those conversations. And I think that we will develop a strategy for who we decide are on, like I think it's going to be a community advisory committee. I think that King's Chapel can develop a strategy for how they select or how people opt in to being on an advisory committee for the church. But I'm with you. I think it's easy to go with the folks that you know and you feel most comfortable with. And there must be a process that makes people feel like it's inclusive and that we are hearing the voices of the community, not just the selected folks who we feel most comfortable with. So not really an answer, but it's a work in progress. And I don't think that we get it perfectly right. And we're not really striving for perfection. We're just trying to do the best that we can with what we have.
Thank you, Roeshana. Jennifer?
There we go. I think I'm unmuted. There we go. Hello. Thank you very much for everything you just shared with us. I would like to hear a little bit more about you were talking about your connection to art, and as you were growing up, and what sort of impact that had on you, and how did it play into coming to be involved in King's Chapel? If so, how much? And you know, what I guess I would like to hear more. I come from a family who very much values that as well. And I would like to hear more about how that influenced your thinking growing up, you know.
Yeah, I mean, for art, like for my family, so my father is not an artist, but he, as I said, he used art as a way to challenge dominant narratives. And I wouldn't say, I think it's serendipitous that I grew up with a strong love and using art as a piece of identity for me, but I'm not sure if it played a major part in my role with King's Chapel, but it played a major part in who I am as an individual and how I look at myself and how I see myself, and just the brilliance of Black artists, musical, visual artists. I think it just helped me create a sense of identity because I was exposed to those things. So I'm not an artist myself, but again, that the art was a form of justice and identity for me.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Kathy?
Hi, I'm wondering about engagement with community at multiple levels. That is, there are some issues that are systemic and require not just one organization, but organizations coming together to turn over practices, long-held legal issues, things like that. And then, you kind of step down a stairs to helping individuals. And so I'm wondering about experiences of other churches, perhaps, but other organizations, at least, about looking at multiple levels, not just one.
Absolutely. And with the work that I did at Harvard, I thought about this work as a systemic work. Like it's not just about helping an individual, but it's really about changing systems. Mm-hmm. And so institutions they have power. Well, Harvard had power or has power. I don't know what's going on.
Yes, it just told Trump where to go.
Exactly, right? Just told Trump where to go. And I don't know if there are any restrictions for King's Chapel getting involved in helping to advocate for certain policies at the local level, at the state level, at the federal level, what that looks like. But I think more voices at the table informing these different levels of government can help to create systemic change. Because I'm totally with you. The change has to start with like policies. And it first starts with the local level. And we know that the city of Boston, they have their reparations task force. So are there opportunities for King's Chapel to engage with the city of Boston around their reparations work, around the history, because it's a shared history. It's not just the city of Boston, but they also share this history with King's Chapel.
It's a huge issue, and I think that if we band together, we can make more headway than we could as individuals. Just a thought.
But it's a good thought. And I think that's how it gets done, is that if we work together, many different institutions, it could be King's Chapel as a religious institution, could be State Street that just has acknowledged their ties to enslavement, Harvard. There are many institutions right now that are starting to find out that, oh my goodness, we have ties to enslavement. We're old. we were developed in the 1600s. Of course, you have ties to enslavement. That was the root of the economy in the city, in this country, was slavery. So I think there's opportunity for these groups to come together.
Thank you.
Maybe I could ask a question or two.
But
I'm curious. Would love to hear from anyone. What are you most looking forward to in this work of repair and reconciliation and repair? Let's start with the bright side of things.
Making a real difference. Whether it's person to person or system to system, I would love to see some substantive change.
I think for me, it would be more cross-generational mixing within the organization, within the church itself. I would like to see more of that, and I would like it to be very apparent and very obvious that it's there. That's all.
well, I'm excited for new relationships. That's what I'm interested in. So that we can effectively do just what Kathy said, come together to try to have an impact. But that every time I've stepped forward in that way, it's been very rewarding. Scary sometimes, complex, but very rewarding.
Faith? Faith, did you raise your hand?
Yes, I would love to see a way for all the passerby, the city of Boston and tourists. I would like to see something that welcomes them to join us in prayer, not having to go inside the church, but outside the church, a way for them to all feel invited to pray with us and us with them, whoever they are.
Others?
Hey, I'm in my head, I'm thinking about the old radio programs we used to do and how many people they weren't part of King's Chapel, but they glommed on to those radio programs. Minister after minister. And, so I'm thinking about, a prayer thing like on a Sunday morning or some other morning, but Sunday seems to be the day that it's 5 minutes. You come together. I don't know. Joy, are you ready to go virtual? Are you ready to be digital?
Trying.
What I think of,
That's how I got
Kathy,
in.
what I think of is a prayer circle available for all passerby to put their hands on and pray.
Yeah, in the past, faith is described like a prayer wheel.
Yes. I've spouted on this before.
I like that idea.
You just keep on with a good idea until it hits, babe.
Carol, did you want to add something? I noticed that you came up.
Yeah, actually, what I was going to say is that I was thinking of also the internal work, because frankly, it's only in the last 10 years or 12 years. I don't know. I must have been left out of the whole talk about systemic stuff until we did some work on that. And then in some ways we have new people coming in all the time, and we have to continue to do educational work amongst ourselves about why we do this and the joy of doing it and the hard work of doing it, but bringing people into the fold so it doesn't feel like only some people are engaged in that, this group that has known it about it before. I think that's important all over the country, really. I mean, I think of people that have, I grew up in a small town, and I wasn't taught to be hateful, but they did vote for Trump. And that was very hard for me, including some of my family. And I'm thinking, what is the difference? Why is this so taking with me? Why is it not with them? And I realized they have the narratives of like 1 or 2 news cycles and things like that. Some of those people will visit Boston because they're interested in revolutionary history. And they're not, they're truly, you know, it's like Jesus learning, they know not what they do. I would say that's it, you know. And how do we keep an openness about what we're doing, what we are doing? How do we keep an engagement with that?
Internally and externally, right?
Yeah, yeah, both.
James.
I don't want to overstate this because I know it's something that we can't be one and done with, but just the penitential aspect of, squaring our own accounts, partly in a literal sense of dirty money, but just rectifying ourselves morally as an institution and living more up to the ideals we've always meant to stand for, even if we stumbled.
Absolutely. That's another question I have. Oh, go ahead, Michael.
Well, I just wanted to thank you, Roeshana, for being a part of this initiative and being a part of our community at King's Chapel. I look forward to your work. Just based on what I've heard today, I am very impressed by especially the notions that you've spoken to around integration with the community. Integration, I think, with not only the external community, but the internal community. And I think that's very important for King's Chapel, because obviously there have been those who have been very supportive of this project from the outset, and those who have not seen that same level of need that we are hopefully addressing, and may not have been able to support it in the same fashion as some of the rest of us have. To answer the question you posed a while back, in terms of what my hope is.
Here? Oh, no.
I think we lost him.
Awesome.
Talk about a cliffhanger.
I know.
Exactly. Oh, wow. Okay. Well, we'll learn as we go forward.
Can I also say that the engagement with the Peace Institute, Feeding the Hungry, which are both white and Black people, with UU Urban Ministry, who deals all the time with these issues. Those are organizations that we have brought, and we should continue to work with them and other organizations too. I'm open to wherever the spirit leads, but engaging people. The other thing is around this whole thing, around reaching out, and it is very new for King's Chapel in one sense, not reaching out. In some sense, we've always done certain things, but there are people who come into the church from all different disciplines, and many who have not had an experience with the church at all. And the healing ministry of the church, is also a really important thing. The individual healing combines with a more open outlook. But some people who have come in from churches or who have been here for a long time, they have felt that I come to church to be, they consider it their little personal connection with people and so forth. And I'm not belittling that at all, but they don't think of the mission in such a, and that's been a failing. I'm not of just the historical church. I think there's always been a lot of this reaching out, but just kind of thinking about all of those things. That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, Tim, Michael is back. Thank you, Carol. And I will say that is not just a King's Chapel issue, right? Like when you attend a church, you feel very comfortable internally. You're coming there to get healed and to build community. I mean, I've been attending Morning Star Baptist Church for about over 20 years. And there are people who are just there just to get healed and to build community within and not to go out. So I just want you to be kind to yourselves, because this internal, focused work doesn't just happen at King Chapel, it happens across the board.
Yeah.
Well, what if we hear from Michael? We're glad you're back, Michael. And then Tim Nelson-Hoy leads our adult religious education. And then maybe we'll bring it to a close. But Michael, how about you? A mystery. So, Tim, you hop on. I'm going to text Michael, see if I can reach him that way.
Okay. Yeah, one thing that occurs to me is that we've done, I think, obviously there's always more work to do, but I think we've done some great work in recent years with our partner church in Transylvania to transform that from sort of a hierarchical relationship into more of a genuine partnership with our partner church, and to look at our shared history as a real exchange and as a real bond of living community. And I would look forward to us doing that with communities closer to home geographically, and in a lot of ways bound to us even closer in history.
Absolutely.
Great, thank you, Tim. Michael, I just sent you a text and I see that you're unmuted.
Yes, can you hear me now?
Yes. We were
my apologies. My PC battery died on me. I'm trying to do two things here at the same time and not being very successful. So anyway, my apologies. What I was going to say in terms of my hopes and expectations, perhaps, for the project is it's evolving, actually, my hope. And it began sort of simplistically in terms of the hope that we can in some way make a difference in terms of righting a very historic wrong. But that has evolved, I think, consistent with a lot of what you have shared with us today, Roeshana, in terms of the impact systematically that has been needed for such a very long time. And that now translating for me into a hope that we can be a catalyst for systemic change going forward. So again, thank you. We look forward to your wisdom and to your experience and to your help.
Yeah, and you all don't get off easy, right? Like I'm gonna do it with all of y'all. Like I expect to get feedback and ideas and support from this church. This cannot be on the shoulders of a group, a committee. It has to be done with everybody. So there will definitely be opportunities for everyone to get involved. And for us to really reach that beloved community that I think we are all hoping for here on this earth.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Well, let's thank God for each and every one of you for your interest and your commitment to the truth, for your love of King's Chapel, and for your love of all the beloveds in our city. Thank you. Roeshana, appreciate you today. Appreciate you always. But why don't we say we will see one another anon. Oh, wait a minute, Felicia.
It's clapping.
Oh, she's clapping? Oh, okay, that I can't, the hand up and the, okay, good. All right, good. Well, thank you, Felicia, and many blessings to you all.
Thank you all.
Good night.
Yeah, thanks to everybody.